Okay, bueno, muy buenos días. Good morning. My name is Jose Carrion. I am chair of the Federal Oversight Board for Puerto Rico. Welcome to all of you who are online. This is the first public meeting being held by video conference for obvious reasons due to current circumstances. I'd like everyone to please assist us by remaining in mute during the video conference until it's time for questions and the like, or participation. Let's start with a roll call for board members. I can see several of you, but for purposes of the record, Dr. Andrew Biggs.
Present.
Mr. Carlos Garcia.
Present.
Judge Gonzalez.
Present.
Mr. Jose Ramon Gonzalez.
Present.
Professor David Skeel. I see you, David. You're on mute. Why don't you just raise your hand for the time being? There you go.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay.
Very good. And do we have Ana Matos Santos with us this morning? We do not. I'd like to welcome and recognize the presence of the ex officio member, Governor Vasquez Garcet's representative, and the head of AFAF, Mr. Omar Marrero Diaz. Welcome, Omar. There's a quorum present, which is a majority of the voting members of the board. And now I'd like to call the meeting to order. And I would like to ask Mr. El Khoury, our general counsel, to act as secretary for this meeting.
Yes, thank you. We will do.
Thank you to all again for attendance at this public hearing held by video conference, and to those that may be watching the live stream of the meeting via the board's website at www.oversightboard.pr.gov. I'm pleased to say that the audio of this meeting via the webcast is available in English and a simultaneous Spanish translation, as well as being translated in sign language. If you log into the English website, the audio will be in English, and if you log into the Spanish website, you will hear the simultaneous translation. We will be handling questions and comments through a form available on our website by clicking the webcast page. Please fill out the form, including your name and any question or comment, and the board will later answer them during the assigned time period before the formal vote on the fiscal plan. The public will have from the time that the meeting starts up to 15 minutes prior to the public comments period starts to share their questions or comments on this form. Questions that can't be answered during the meeting due to time constraints will later be answered and published on our website.
What is the group? What was it?
Today, the following topics are part of the board's agenda. Number one, approval of minutes of public meeting and executive session of the board. Number two, certain administrative matters. Number three, an opening statement by myself. Discussion. Number four, discussion of oversight board actions in light of COVID-19. Number five, updates from the oversight board operations since last public meeting. Number six, remarks of Commonwealth officials on proposed revisions to the certified Commonwealth fiscal plan. Number seven, board discussion of the proposed revisions to the certified Commonwealth plan. Number eight, public comments on the proposed revisions to the certified Commonwealth fiscal plan. Number nine, discussions and certification of the revised Commonwealth fiscal plan. And number 10, discussion on other topics. As you can see, we have a robust and full agenda this morning. Let's move along. Number one, approval of minutes. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes of the board's last public hearing held on December 19th, 2019, and the minutes of the board's executive sessions held on February 9th, 2020, February 28th, 2020, March 13th, 2020, April 1st, 2020, and May 22nd, 2020. The proposed minutes are included in your meeting materials. Minutes are attached here too as Appendix A, B, C, D, E, and F respectively. Do any members have any questions about these minutes? Very good. There being no questions, let's move along. I would like to ask a motion to approve these minutes, please.
I move to approve the minutes of the board's public meetings held on December 19th, 2019, and the minutes of the board's executive sessions held on February 9th, 2020, February 28th, 2020, March 13th, 2020, and April 1st, 2020, in the form presented to the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to second that motion.
Very good. Thank you, David, and thank you, Andrew. I'd like to ask for a voice vote. Those in favor, please say yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Very good. Anybody opposed, please say no. All right. All the members having voted in favor of the motion, the minutes are approved. The administrative matters. May I recognize Judge Gonzalez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Judge, you have a motion?
1 second. Yes.
Well, perhaps somebody else could
I'd
read.
like to make the following motion. Hello? Hello, I'd like to make the following motion. The the resolution, the board confirms and approves the unanimous written consents adopted by the board since the adjournment of the board's last public meeting, which are listed in Appendix G attached here too.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to second that motion.
I'd like to ask for a voice vote. Those in favor, please say yes.
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 Anybody
Yes.
opposed, please say no. All members having voted in favor of the motion, the resolution has been approved and passed unanimously. Dr. Biggs, would you like to make a motion, please?
I would. Between the adjournment to this meeting and the opening of the board's next public meeting, the board may consider in executive session any and all matters it is authorized to consider under PROMESA, including first, any certification determinations authorized PROMESA, including certification determinations under Section 206 of PROMESA. Second, any submissions or authorizations authorized for PROMESA. And third, any filings authorized under Title III of PROMESA in each case that are set forth as part of the vote to convene such executive sessions. The board may also act by unanimous written consent between meetings in accordance with the bylaws, with such consent to include consent by electronic transmission.
Judge?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to second the motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Biggs and Judge Gonzalez. I'd like to ask for a voice vote. Those in favor, please say yes.
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 Anybody opposed, please say no. All members having voted in favor of the motion, the resolution is approved unanimously. Now let's move on to the public to consider the certification of our Commonwealth Fiscal Plan. Please allow me a few minutes for an opening statement. Today's Puerto Rico is not the same as the Puerto Rico of a year ago, 6 months ago, or even of 3 months ago. As recently as the 1st of March, the headline of one of the island's main newspapers touted the government's fiscal scenario as optimistic. Puerto Rico seemed to be headed in the right direction as it slowly but surely recovered from the aftermath of a series of devastating natural disasters. Revenue and unemployment projections were promising, and with 60% of creditors behind the filed plan of adjustment, the end of bankruptcy for Puerto Rico and the beginning of renewed opportunity for its people seemed to be within our reach. Today, in the midst of the worst public health crisis in 100 years, the government of Puerto Rico is projecting the cumulative impact of COVID-19 on the economy to be in excess of $6 billion through 2021. More than 300,000 Puerto Ricans have been forced to file for unemployment More than 30,000 local businesses have had to tap into federal resources to protect the livelihood of their businesses and their employees. Students of all ages remain uncertain of their academic future, and many families struggle for their meals, while others still await for a safe place to live following the earthquakes of earlier this year. Even as the economy progressively reopens and we cautiously try to find a sense of normalcy in these least normal of times, some still grieve for sick or lost ones, and many fear for the safety of family and friends. This is certainly not the same in Puerto Rico. As such, for the past 3 months, the Oversight Board's sole focus has been to support the government of Puerto Rico in protecting the well-being of its people and help minimize and contain the resulting health and economic effects of this pandemic. We also have to take a huge step back to analyze, to the best of our abilities, the fiscal, social, and economic effects of COVID-19 in order to find the most realistic and viable path forward, as required of us by law. Fortunately, the fiscal discipline of the last 3 years has left Puerto Rico in a considerable better financial shape than many states to face this crisis. And we have worked united with the government of Puerto Rico to ensure that the island receives its fair share of funds from the federal government's emergency programs to provide much needed aid on our way to recovery. We hope that the situation stabilizes as quickly as possible, that the government acts with the swiftness that this crisis requires, and that the residents of Puerto Rico stay safe. It is simply not possible to say how long this crisis will last or what Puerto Rico's full recovery will look like, but it is imperative to have a plan in place and act on it to move forward and in the right direction. I would like now to ask our Executive Director, Ms. Natalie Jaresco, to provide an overview of recent actions taken by the Federal Oversight Board in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Ms. Jaresco?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Oversight Board has been actively supporting the people and government of Puerto Rico in light of this terrible pandemic, understanding since the beginning that the health and safety of the people of Puerto Rico must be the #1 priority at all times. In response to the outbreak, Governor Wanda Vazquez-Garcet and the island's leadership have taken important measures to protect the island's residents. I will now highlight the Oversight Board's response to this crisis. First, we made available $160 million of emergency fund reserves from fiscal year 19 and 20 for the government to be able to mitigate and contain the virus. Second, we extended twice the deadline for the government to submit a revised proposed Commonwealth fiscal plan. We sent a letter to the White House and congressional leadership to ensure Puerto Rico plays an essential role in any movement of supply chain manufacturing, especially pharmaceutical and medical products, back to the United States as part of the ongoing national security dialogue. We approved the exemption of sales and use tax on prepared food and first need items through May 25th, 2020, at an effective cost of around $44 million. We authorized the expenditure of $787 million to support those most affected by the emergency measures. The measures included in the package are $212 million in one-time bonuses for public and private nurses, technicians, emergency management service personnel, correctional officers, and other Department of Public Safety staff in the front lines of the fight against COVID-19. $50 million for investments in hospitals and public safety to restock medical supplies and invest in equipment for a period of at least 2 months. $160 million in one-time direct payments to self-employed individuals and small businesses whose incomes have been severely affected by the disruption of the work and income. Self-employed, 200,000 residents, every worker receiving $500, and small and medium-sized business owners receiving $1,500 for every business. In addition, $255 million for the Puerto Rico Department of Education to support and enable online learning while schools are closed, to buy tablets for every student and teacher, and provide teachers and students with software and training. $100 million of the $787 million went to municipalities to provide them support during a period of lost revenues for the next 2 months as a result of the emergency measures implemented to fight COVID-19. And finally, approximately $2 million to fund COVID-19 related research and development in the University of Puerto Rico's Medical Sciences Department. We also reviewed draft legislation for consistency with the certified fiscal plan and budget and notified the governor of Puerto Rico and the legislature as required. We notified that the agreements to purchase rapid COVID-19 rapid test kits, as well as other transactions performed during the state of emergency declared on account of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll discuss these actions further detail later today. We also approved the government's request for a cash advance of $400 million to expedite the distribution of the CARES Act individual federal rebate to the people of Puerto Rico. We opened an urgent webpage for residents and businesses in Puerto Rico to have full information on the emergency measures, the programs that are available with federal and local government support, with particular emphasis on how to access the funds provided by different agencies. We've communicated with the Department of Education of Puerto Rico and later with the governor, suggesting short, medium, and long-term with recommendations on how they may invest the $2.2 billion allocated to Puerto Rico through the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act, to finance eligible expenses related to the pandemic in a way that is consistent, efficient, and transparent. We also communicated with the Secretary of the Department of Education requesting a work plan before the disbursement of funds received as a result of that CARES Act, in addition to weekly reports once the funds are facility to provide working capital to municipalities in light of deferred property tax payments. We proposed to the government the use of $253 million in funds made available as a result of increased federal Medicaid funding in this fiscal year to further improve public health care in light of the demands on the system. And finally, we requested weekly reporting on the use of the funds allocated to Puerto Rico as part of the federal and territorial action, including the Commonwealth Emergency Reserve, the $787 million Emergency Measures Support Package, the $2.2 billion use of CARES Act funds, the Department of Education Distance Learning Funds, and other CARES Act funds, as well as the University of Puerto Rico CARES Act funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Esco. I would like to now ask Judge Gonzalez to provide an update on actions related to debt restructuring proceedings of the Commonwealth in light of COVID-19. No.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On February 28, 2020, the Oversight Board filed an amended plan of adjustment to restructure approximately $35 billion of debt and other claims against the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, the Public Building Authority, and the Employee Retirement System. The plan reflected the new and more favorable plan support agreement with certain bondholders of the Commonwealth that the Oversight Board filed on February 9, 2020. In general terms, the amended plan would cut the Commonwealth's debt and other claims by almost 70% from $35 billion to about $11 billion, with an additional $1 billion reduction from the initial plan of adjustment. Ensured sustainable and affordable annual debt service of less than 9% of the government's own sourced revenues by reducing the maximum annual debt service by 64% from $4.2 billion to $1.5 billion. Reduced the Commonwealth total debt payments, including a COFINA restructuring bond, senior bonds, by 56% from $90.4 billion to $39.7 billion. Reduced the maturity of new Commonwealth debt to 20 years from 30 years, saving an additional $5 billion in debt payments as compared to the initial plan of adjustment. The plan's 5 main elements involve the debt of the central government, the Public Buildings Authority, and the Employee Retirement System, claims against the Commonwealth based on revenues historically conditionally appropriated to certain instrumentalities, and general unsecured claims against the Commonwealth, PBA, and ERS. The plan represents meaningful concession by bondholders and other parties holding claims against the Commonwealth, saving billions in debt service that would help protect pensions and government services. The amended plan has support from substantially more creditors than the previous agreement. Holders of over $10.5 billion of bonds, $1 billion of bonds have signed onto the plan support agreement and have agreed to support the plan, representing 60% of the aggregate general obligation and PBA claims. The amended plan does not materially change the agreements the Oversight Board previously reached with the Official Committee of Retirees and with a group of current government employees represented by the Public Service Union and the Puerto Rico chapter of ASME. The amended plan filed with the District Court for the District of Puerto Rico provided greater confidence towards Puerto Rico's path to exit bankruptcy. Bankruptcy has held Puerto Rico back, and the confirmation of the amended plan would have reduced the time until Puerto Rico emerges from bankruptcy and the legal costs due to the avoidance of protracted litigation. Puerto Rico must turn the corner to allow businesses to invest, for our economy to grow, and for the people of Puerto Rico to prosper. However, Puerto Rico, like most of the world, faces an unprecedented reality in light of the COVID-19. In response to the outbreak, the governor and other island leadership have taken important measures to protect the island's residents. The Oversight Board agreed at the inception of this pandemic that the health and safety of the people of Puerto Rico should be the #1 priority at this time. That is why, on March 23rd, the Oversight Board presented a motion in court to adjourn consideration of the proposed plan of adjustments disclosure hearing until further notice. The court granted our motion, which remains in effect today. We hope, as we work through this pandemic, that we can also refocus our attentions on the debt restructuring efforts sometime in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Gonzalez. I would like to ask Professor Skeel to provide an update, please, on actions related to debt restructuring proceedings of the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, PREPA, in light of COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Similar to the situation that Judge Gonzalez just described, and in close consultation with the government of Puerto Rico, on March 27, the Oversight Board filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of Puerto Rico a motion seeking to adjourn the hearing and all related deadlines related to the PREPA Restructuring Support Agreement, or RSA, and the settlement motion connected with that. On April 2, Judge Laura Taylor Swain entered an order granting the urgent motion filed by the Oversight Board, adjourning the hearing to consider the PREPA RSA, the settlement or Rule 9019 motion, and all of the related deadlines. Her order directed the government parties to file a status report on or before May 15 that, first, updates the court on PREPA's financial condition, and second, proposes next steps with respect to the Rule 9019 settlement motion and motions to dismiss pending in the 2 so-called current expense adversary proceedings that involve the fuel line lenders, UTR, the Public Employee Union, and the PREPA retirement system. On May 15, the Oversight Board and the government provided the required update, stating that all briefing and hearing deadlines related to the settlement motion should continue to be adjourned, quote, to allow the government parties to focus on addressing these complex and important issues and gaining better visibility into their impact on the power sector in Puerto Rico, close quotes. The government parties also consented to the prior request by the fuel line lenders and the union entities that the hearing on all pending motions to dismiss in their adversary proceedings, which had been currently scheduled for June 3, that those be adjourned, subject to the condition that once briefing recommences, the motions to dismiss in the adversary proceedings will be heard before the settlement motion. The court granted the motion, which currently remains in effect. Given the considerable uncertainty about the effect of the coronavirus on Puerto Rico, the Oversight Board continues to believe that the primary focus of the government and the Oversight Board must be on helping to protect the people of Puerto Rico from the virus and to minimize and contain the pandemic.
Thank you, Professor Skeel. Let's move along to an update, if we may, on update regarding since our last public meeting. I would like to ask our Executive Director, Mr. Esco, to provide an overview of other Oversight Board's actions since the last public meeting unrelated to the crisis by COVID-19. Mr. Esco?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In November of 2019, the Oversight Board held a hearing to learn about the Puerto Rico Department of Education's progress in implementing the Certified Fiscal Plan and carrying out the structural reforms that are intended to benefit the students of Puerto Rico. The hearing was attended by Department of Education officials, as well as private sector educators and education experts. The Oversight Board inquired of the department about the implementation of necessary measures relating to effective management, the agency's special education program, federal funding, amongst other issues that are outlined in the Certified Fiscal Plan. Other government officials and private sector education experts, including parents of special education students, discussed the public school system in Puerto Rico and their experiences dealing with the department. Many of the attendants noted the obstacles that prevent the public education system from transforming and improving student academic achievement. The educators and experts made specific recommendations on how to improve the public education system. Then in December of 2019, the Oversight Board held a hearing on the status of the efficiency measures that the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation needs to implement to comply with the Certified Fiscal Plan for Puerto Rico, and how they would ensure best practices with regard to the correctional community's safety, deterrence, and rehabilitation. Correction officials and prison rights advocates attended the hearing. It was held to discuss the status of reforms necessary to foster fiscal responsibility and improve management at the agency. This effort directly affects prison living conditions, health services, security measures for both inmates and correctional officers, amongst other matters. Over the last few months, we continued to perform oversight of government fiscal activities, budget approvals, reporting, status of implementation of key structural and fiscal reforms. In some areas, such as the PREPA transformation, specifically the P3 process ongoing for the grid, we see encouraging progress and hope to make an announcement later this summer with the government. In other areas, primarily fiscal, we've called for corrective action upon receipt of the Commonwealth's budget to actual reports to ensure that there is greater fiscal responsibility. For example, we've requested information pursuant to Section 203 of PROMESA. We've again called for immediate action before the end of the fiscal year, given the government's failure to collect funds from several entities that are not remitting the employee contributions towards the defined contribution plans on a timely basis. This practice is simply unacceptable. Equally as important, we've insisted on prioritization of the government's issuance of the much-delayed comprehensive financial statements. The government must ensure that fiscal year 2017 and 2018 are issued as soon as possible, and that best practices are in place to complete the fiscal year 2019 and 2020 audits. The Oversight Board is close to publishing the results pertaining to fiscal year 2017 review services as part of an investigation requested by Congress that we conduct a financial examination of audit, accounting, and other services performed by BDO Puerto Rico since 2016. We also worked in order to ensure police officers access to stable and secure retirement income. The Oversight Board budgeted for the employer's contribution to police Social Security in fiscal year 20, and we ensured that the government implemented that reform. Police are now eligible to receive Social Security. Given this process was delayed for 6 months due to the government's slower implementation, we've established a Social Security working group to learn lessons and drive lessons from our past mistakes and ensure swift implementation of teacher Social Security going forward. We've worked with UPR, the University of Puerto Rico, and the Department of Justice together to establish and fund an interagency effort that would reduce the backlog in the property registry of Puerto Rico. The agreement between these agencies should reduce the processing time of backlogged cases from the projected 14 years to under 4 years. Improvement in the registry process is a critical structural reform and part of the CDBG-DR action plan as well. On March 30th, 2020, the Oversight Board informed the government that revenue projections were on target, and as a result, we released the 2.5% withholding from the budgetary reserve of fiscal year 20. In April and May, the Oversight Board staff has worked closely with the government, CRIM, and mayors to outline the next steps in light of Judge Swain's nullification of Act 29. The decision by the U.S. District Court took effect on May 7, reinstating the municipality's obligation to reimburse the government for the retirement benefits provided to municipal retirees. On April 14, 2020, the Oversight Board announced that it had certified the action plan by the Puerto Rico Department of Housing, Vivienda, detailing the use of funds from the U.S. Department of Housing's HUD Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program, or CDBG-DR. The Oversight Board welcomed the decision by HUD to make a $1.7 billion block of funding available from its CDBG-DR program, demonstrating that the cooperation between the Oversight Board and the government of Puerto Rico can be efficient and in the interests of Puerto Rico. The Oversight Board welcomed the selection by the Puerto Rico Fiscal Agency and Financial Advisory Authority, AFAF, of the Community Foundation for the Management and Administration of the University of Puerto Rico's Independent Scholarship Fund, meant to ensure that no student is denied a UPR education as a result of financial need. The Oversight Board worked directly with the government and municipalities to respond to the impact of the earthquakes in January and May. We opened access to the Commonwealth's Emergency Reserve, including $15 million in direct transfers to municipalities. We approved the use of $9 million to date, requested for the first steps of demolition and debris removal in Guayanilla, Guanica, and Peñuelas, which are a prerequisite for redevelopment of the southwestern region. As a next step, the Oversight Board urged the government to determine what incremental efforts of this type, debris removal and demolition, are necessary in other municipalities, such as Ponce and Yauco, that have also suffered from the earthquakes, and that these incremental requests be submitted to the Oversight Board as soon as possible. The Oversight Board staff is hard at work, as you will hear more today, to develop with the government and present for the board's certification 20 fiscal plans and budgets. These include the Commonwealth, which we'll discuss today, PREPA, PRASA, COSEC, HTA, UPR, the 10 municipalities in the Municipality Pilot Program, CRIM, FRIDCO, and COFINA. As part of the fiscal year 21 budget process, we have and we continue to engage in a collaborative process with the government to develop a revised Commonwealth fiscal plan, which reflects the most up-to-date information available and which will form the base for the fiscal year 2021 budget. We will discuss this fiscal plan revision in more detail later. In terms of the board's operations, we are hard at work to augment internal capabilities to the Oversight Board staff. And as part of this work, I testified in Congress on behalf of the Oversight Board to provide an update to the U.S. House of Representatives Natural Resource Committee on a discussion draft regarding potential amendments to PROMESA. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Esco. And now let's move along to government remarks on the proposed revision of the certified fiscal plan. Let me recognize and welcome once again Mr. Omar Marrero, Executive Director of the Puerto Rico Fiscal Agency and Financial Advisory Authority, known by its Spanish acronym as AFAF, who will make certain remarks on the revisions proposed by the government to the fiscal plan of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico that was certified approximately a year ago on the 9th of May, 2019. Mr. Marrero.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman, as well as the members of Financial Oversight and Management Board for Puerto Rico. I trust that you and the rest of the members, as well as your family, are healthy and safe, and hopefully will remain such. On behalf of the government of Puerto Rico, I would like to thank you first and foremost for the opportunity to present the 2020 fiscal plan for Puerto Rico. I will also avail myself of this opportunity to thank you for the cooperation that have existed between the Oversight Board and the government of Puerto Rico during the COVID-19 pandemic. As you know, today the government will present its 11th provision for the Commonwealth Fiscal Plan that the Oversight Board has required since PROMESA was enacted in 2016. This fiscal plan has been updated to reflect the new economic reality for Puerto Rico as of May 1st. It is by far the most complex due to the high level of social economic uncertainty caused by the global outbreak of COVID-19. Notwithstanding the very real and substantial challenges facing Puerto Rico in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is vital that Puerto Rico move ahead with its efforts to emerge from Title III as quickly, efficiently, as early as possible. Waiting indefinitely is not an option. We believe that, as Judge Gonzalez just correctly stated, bankruptcy has held Puerto Rico back and its people. That's why we believe this plan is the first step towards making that a reality. Throughout Puerto Rico's restructuring process, the Oversight Board has consistently stated its desire for a one-and-done approach. This will require Puerto Rico to right-size its debt burden under a plan of adjustment, so that restructured debt will not find its way back in 5, 10, or 20 years from now. The government of Puerto Rico fully agrees with that long-term solution. We believe it's the best way forward for Puerto Rico to achieve fiscal responsibility and access to the capital markets. Despite sharing the same goal of this one-and-done solution, the government and the board have had a long history marked with uneven periods of cooperation on one hand and disagreement of others, some of which has ended in litigation. Notwithstanding such important disagreements, the government and the board have actually collaborated and achieved several successful restructuring over the last 4 years in the aggregate amount of over $22 billion. For example, in November 2018, GDB completed a first-of-a-kind conceptual restructuring under Title VI of PROMESA of about $4.8 billion. In February 2019, COFINA consummated its Title III plan of adjustment to restructure approximately $18 billion of debt. And in July 2019, PRASA was able to enter into definitive agreements to restructure almost $1 billion in debt under federal programs administered by the EPA and USDA under Section 207 of PROMESA, providing significant annual debt service relief for PRASA, among other benefits. These efforts garnered the full support of the board as well as the government, including both legislative and executive branches. In the past, the government and the board have also had disagreements over fiscal plan and budgets. While we have generally agreed on over 90% of the fiscal plan provisions, including important aspects like achieving energy reform through public-private partnerships. Any remaining disagreements, in my opinion, have been primarily based on public policy decisions, such as the treatment of government employee bonuses and pensions, among other things. The government believes that any disagreements we have are reconcilable, and that's why we remain committed to working with the board to achieve consensus wherever possible, to build upon prior successes. As Justice Breyer advised in his book, Making Our Democracy Work, a workable government requires trust among government institutions and between those institutions and the people. In order to achieve a long-term workable government for the people of Puerto Rico, the government and the board must trust each other in our respective roles. Our efforts must continue if we're going to achieve a one-and-done plan of adjustment for the Commonwealth. But even the best laid plans, and you know this, are subject to uncontrollable circumstances. And Puerto Rico, fortunately, have had more than its fair share. In 2017, while we came into public office, focused on the economic and fiscal crisis, Puerto Rico was hit by Category 4 and Category 5 hurricanes, resulting in substantial devastation across the island and an unparalleled loss of property and infrastructure. And up to this date, the response facing Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria has been the most complex and the longest in U.S. history. In August 2019, Puerto Rico expected political upheaval that delayed the restructuring process as the government adjusted to a new administration under Governor Wanda Vázquez Garcet. December 2019, the island began to experience substantial seismic activity, including 5.8 and 6.4 magnitude earthquakes in January 2020, and a 5.4 earthquake earlier this month, causing homes, buildings, schools, and even churches to collapse and cause widespread power outages. Now, since March 2020, the government and the world has faced the unprecedented health and economic challenges posed by the novel COVID-19 pandemic. Notwithstanding all of these catastrophic events, we are resilient. That's why Puerto Rico has been making progress to achieve a long-term fiscal solution through Title III and signaled many, many times a willingness to consider a board plan of adjustment proposal, obviously subject to additional bondholders' concession and protections for the government pensioners. Throughout this time, we have publicly stated many times as well that Puerto Rico is committed to paying its debt. We agree with fiscal responsibility. However, in the face of continued discrimination under federal laws because inequality and ongoing environmental catastrophes, the debt repayment solution cannot rest solely on austerity. Again, to be clear, Governor Vasquez's administration has been and will be committed to transparency, accountability, and fiscal responsibility. But the administration is also committed to protecting Puerto Rico's most vulnerable citizens, acknowledging that Puerto Rico continues to experience a higher level of poverty as compared to the mainland United States and continued outmigration that threatens long-term economic growth. As Judge Swain aptly noted in her January 7, 2020 decision, the goal of these PROMESA cases is not merely to maximize creditor recoveries, but to implement a more holistic approach that focuses on the continuation and future of a government and its instrumentalities and their ability to meet the needs of the Commonwealth residents, as well as provide proper recompense to creditors. A plan founded only on austerity and not reinvestment on its people will offer no hope to Puerto Rico and will become a self-fulfilling prophecy of continual outmigration, which will then ultimately hurt bondholders whose prospect of repayment will require population rotation to fuel an economic recovery. The COVID-19 has only heightened our economic concerns. The temporary shutdown of the world economy has disrupted supply chains and upended entire industries, including tourism, hospitality, and entertainment industry that are so important for Puerto Rico's future growth. To use the COVID-19 crisis as an excuse to sit back and wait another year or even longer to restructure Puerto Rico's remaining debt will be a poor decision. Our inaction will likely push even more Puerto Ricans to leave the island, potentially more quickly, resulting in an unrecoverable loss of economic activities and make it even more difficult to rejuvenate our economy. That's why, to avoid such result, the government and the board must continue to work together to formulate a long-term solution for Puerto Rico that will allow us to emerge from Title III as quickly as possible, but in a fiscally prudent manner. Because as Judge Gonzalez just said, bankruptcy has held Puerto Rico back. As I will discuss in further detail, the 2020 fiscal plan referred to significant effects of the COVID-19 on Puerto Rico and the world's economy. Such negative effects will compel the rethinking of a new Commonwealth plan of adjustment that should be fair and just to all parties. As always, we're willing to engage with the board and all parties to achieve a fair and just resolution, and even suggest a court-appointed mediation process, which has been proved successful in the COVID-19 Title III plan of adjustment, to be used as a vehicle. But again, a one and done solution cannot mean that the hands of Puerto Rico are tied, especially even what we have been through in recent years. That's why, in light of our new economic reality, we believe that any plan of adjustment which should acknowledge the need and desire to be fair to creditors, take into account the continuing uncertainties that Puerto Rico and the world is facing, extend out migration, reduce debt obligations going forward to a sustainable level that does not risk health, welfare, and the safety of the people, ensure that pensioners do not bear a disproportionate share of the economic sacrifice because they have already contributed. And obviously, and more importantly, to reinvest in Puerto Rico, which will increase the creation of new jobs, grow the economy, reduce income inequality, expand workforce development programs, transition informal activity to the formal sector, increase the median income, and most importantly, reduce the number of Puerto Ricans living under the poverty level. Finally, and before I get into the details of the plan, I want to thank the Oversight Board for incorporating already some aspects and some recommendations from our plan. But to the extent that we have received the document early this morning and we have yet to receive the final model of the plan, we need more time to fully understand the macroeconomic assumptions and express our opinion based on the plan. However, with that overview of the key issues and considerations facing the government, let's now turn to discussing the specific provision of the 2020 fiscal plan. As you already know, our 2020 fiscal plan builds on the framework from prior fiscal plan and includes funding necessary for the central government, in its public corporations, and municipalities to continue providing essential services to the people of Puerto Rico. Consistent with the government's long-held policy, which is now more crucial than ever, the fiscal plan guarantees the payment of the pensions for our retirees. The COVID-19 virus and the resulting economic slowdown has caused a global economic crisis unlike any faced in our lifetimes, putting an end to the longest expansion in U.S. history. The virus and its economic effects have affected Puerto Rico both directly and indirectly. And as of May 2016, there have been 3,324 confirmed cases of COVID-19, 129 deaths, and over 2 months in which non-essential businesses have been closed and a curfew in place, bringing the economy to essentially bringing halt. The 2020 fiscal plan attempts to capture that impact of the economic shock as a result of COVID-19, as well as the impact of the federal and local stimulus packages. On the macroeconomic side, we have, as in prior fiscal submissions, our model estimates the pre-hurricane trend growth of Puerto Rico, adjusted to take into account for the economic impact of Hurricanes Irma and Maria, now the earthquake, and now COVID-19 pandemic. Hurricanes Irma and Maria created a new economic reality for Puerto Rico, drastically altering Puerto Rico's future. Fiscal year 2018 saw a decline in real GNP of 4.7%, reflecting economic devastation in the wake of Hurricanes Irma and Maria, which struck the island in the first quarter of the fiscal year. There was a bounce back in 2019 of 1.5%, which was fueled by disaster funding mainly. Then we had a series of earthquakes that affected south part of Puerto Rico, and now the COVID-19. Although the post-hurricane recovery was expected to continue as more federal reconstruction funding was available and the rebuilding of the island progressed, the onset of the global pandemic, 2020, has changed the global economic prospects, including Puerto Rico. In light of the social distancing measures undertaken to control the spread of COVID-19 in Puerto Rico, the United States, and the rest of the world, a steep and widespread decline in economic activity in healthcare is expected to continue. It is very likely that this year the global economy will experience its worst recession since the Great Depression. The COVID-19 pandemic will be felt in Puerto Rico through two channels. First, the recession caused by the pandemic in the mainland United States will affect Puerto Rico through its close economic ties with the mainland. And second, there is a compounding direct impact in Puerto Rico as the Commonwealth daily living and economic activity is altered by social distancing measures and stay-at-home orders, increased unemployment claims, and economic uncertainty. If we get into the presentation, in slide 2, you can see the forecast for direct economic losses in Puerto Rico. Our model forecasts a 786 million shock in fiscal year 2020, followed by an incremental 5.8 billion decline in fiscal year 2020, partially offset by the stimulus packages from both local and federal authorities. The forecast assume a 2.5-month lockdown and a gradual reopening model of the rate at which unemployment claims decline after hurricanes Irma and Maria. As you can see at the charts at the bottom, the rate of GNP decline begins softening in September of fiscal year 2021, but the GNP growth does not turn positive until the end of fiscal year 2021. Next slide will show how the GNP trend remains similar to the May 9, 2019 certified fiscal plan. But the aforementioned shocks in fiscal year 2020 and 21 will change the course of economic activity in Puerto Rico over the entire forecast period. The level of economic activity is essentially shifted out. And this is extremely important given the inherent relationship between nominal GNP and economically sensitive measures such as SUT, personal income tax, and corporate income tax. It is important to note a key of similarity between the 9/11 attacks and the COVID-19 pandemic. The 9/11 attacks represented an economic disruption with a non-economic root cause. Financial markets dropped sharply in the face of uncertainty. Travel industry was directly and severely affected, and the ensuing disruptions directly affected both the mainland as well as Puerto Rico. 9/11 was especially hard on the travel industry as well as the COVID-19, but this time the effect is likely to be much larger. To give you some perspective, in the first 5 months after 9/11, air travel demand fell 31%. But in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is down more than 95% relative to a year ago. And as you will remember, and has been evidenced by DMO data, Puerto Rico was hitting record numbers in passengers and visitors to Puerto Rico. As we all know, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the federal government has dedicated a historic amount of financial support through both monetary and fiscal policy actions. The total impact of the federal monetary and fiscal programs is estimated to exceed $6.8 trillion. $6.8 trillion. Certainly a mind-blowing figure. If we go to the next slide, sorry, the 2020 fiscal plan assumes gross stimulus of $12.8 billion, and this is both federal and local. Because a significant portion, as you know, of personal consumption expenses in Puerto Rico are devoted to imported goods and services, the effect of the stimulus funds is less than the gross dollar amount. Therefore, the result is expected to be a net stimulative impact of the economy of Puerto Rico of $5.7 billion. If we move to the next slide, slide number 5, on March 27 this year, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Stability Act, known as CARES Act, was signed into law. Of the roughly $2.3 trillion of approved funding under the CARES Act, Congress appropriated about $150 billion to state and local governments under the Coronavirus Relief Fund under Section 5001. Of such $150 billion, $3 billion was allocated for the District of Columbia and the 5 U.S. territories, including Puerto Rico, and $8 billion was allocated to tribal governments. Finally, Section 5001 of the CARES Act states that the District of Columbia, the territories, will receive their pro rata portion of the $3 billion based on the share of their combined population. Hence, Puerto Rico's population of 3.2 million people account for 74.7% of the entire pool, thus awarding us roughly $2.2 billion. On slide 6, you will see essentially the 3 main requirements, including Section 5001 of the CARES Act for the use of the CRF funds. First, they must be used for necessary expenses incurred as part of the emergency caused by COVID-19. Second, the expenses covered by said funds cannot have been previously budgeted as of March 27, 2020, which was the date on which CARES Act was approved. Finally, the expenses must be incurred between March 1st and December 30th of the current year. In addition to these three main conditions, the U.S. Treasury issued guidelines that interpreted these limitations and established additional parameters for the disbursement of these funds. In that sense, the Treasury stipulated that the first limitation that Congress imposed means that to the funds is that the funds must be used to finance actions taken to respond to the public health emergency caused by the COVID-19. So this includes direct measures such as medical needs, but as well as indirect actions to respond to the situation such as financial aid to those who have suffered losses due to the monetary closings caused by COVID-19. But the U.S. Treasury guidelines also expressly state that the CRF funds cannot be used to cover government entities' lost revenues, nor can these CRF funds be used to cover other ineligible expenses under the CARES Act. Therefore, it is clear then that by statutory provision, the funds received by Puerto Rico as part of the CRF are not totally unrestricted. The guidelines establish several examples of uses that are eligible, and among these, I should stand out the following: COVID-19 related medical expenses, expenses associated with public health issues related to COVID-19, payroll expenses for first responders, healthcare, and similar employees whose services are substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, expenses aimed at facilitating compliance with public health measures, expenses associated with financial assistance to deal with situations caused by the COVID-19 emergency, such as business interruption to small businesses, and any other expense reasonable necessary to exercise eligible government actions. In light of that, on the next slide, you will see a more granular breakdown of how Puerto Rico has decided to allocate its coronavirus relief fund allotment. At a high level, you will see an allocation of $965 million for economic stimulus, $500 million for health-related expenses, $290 million for government-related expenses, and $485 million as a reserve for future programs. Our goal here is to distribute the funds as quickly as possible to put them in the hands of organizations and individuals that need them the most, while ensuring transparency, compliance, and proper use of these funds. That's why, to that end, the government developed a strategic and disbursement plan that at the time of this publication was more comprehensive and detailed than any other state. To ensure appropriate allocation of funds and oversight, review panels comprised of representatives from each lead agency for individual programs are providing input and recommendations regarding program guidelines and disbursement allocations, and a newly constituted Coronavirus Relief Fund Committee for oversight of disbursements will maintain overall oversight and governance for all programs and authorize all disbursements. In the next slide, you will see essentially the disaster recovery funding spend curve, which reflects a spending over 15 years and a total of $82 billion, which is based on the most recent estimates. Those disaster funding also include private insurance. On slide number 9, we essentially highlight here the historical trend of the real GNP in Puerto Rico. Obviously, the COVID-19 has shifted the curve down, but a similar trend persisted prior to the pandemic. Therefore, structural reforms and COVID stimulus and disaster funds can help mitigate that trend. However, the trend nonetheless persists. As with the prior slide, in the next one, we show the population forecast trend, and essentially it is consistent with prior history. The fiscal year 2019 starting point has been updated to reflect the latest information from the U.S. Census Bureau, which shifts up the curve, but the shape of the curve remains. In the medium and long term, population is driven by structural, economic, and fiscal policy related factors. Now on slide 11, we essentially brought together the prior two slides and looking at the historical and forecast of the real GNP per capita. You can see a decline in fiscal year 2020 and in fiscal year 2021. But in the medium to long term, the forecast aligns with recent history. Therefore, the forecast illustrates that Puerto Rico's residents are not getting poorer, but it's expected that there will be fewer Puerto Rican residents on the island. As we now get into the revenue forecast, I think that it is very important to highlight in the next couple slides, we essentially analyzed the impact of the COVID-19 as well as the stimulus from the local and federal authorities. But also, what we did, it was to exclude the revenues from Act 154 as well as non-resident withholding. And the fact that we did that is because these revenue streams are mostly correlated to the worldwide production of pharmaceuticals than Puerto Rico GMP. And second, when we compare with the other states, such revenues the old state peers generally do not have such similar revenues. So for the benefit of our exercise, both the 154 revenues as well as the non-resident withholding revenues are taken out. So in slide 12, you'll see that the fiscal year 2020 forecast is based on the liquidity plan for 2020 and has been adjusted to reflect, first, updated preliminary actuals through March, including non-recurring revenue of approximately $488 million in the first half of the year. Second, certain year-to-date overperformance pre-COVID is assumed to continue for the remaining of the year. And last but not least, the fiscal year 2020 COVID-19 related adjustment included executive actions, some of which are strictly timing related due to tax referrals, as well as economic activity adjustment. We end up with $9.2 billion as a revenue forecast, which is essentially consistent with what you may have heard from the Secretary of Treasury, Secretary Pares spoke about it. Slide 13 shows how the general fund forecast compares to estimated revenue loss reported by other states. As you will see, the forecast is decrease in fiscal year 2020 revenues as compared to the original budget after adjusting for timing-related adjustment and non-recurring revenue is essentially in line with post-COVID projections provided by mainline states, as shown below. On slide 14, if you look at slide 14, at face value, fiscal year 2021 forecast is up by 1.7% fiscal year 2020. However, the reason why this revenue did not increase in fiscal year 2020 is in part due to assumed timing-related tax referral from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2021 due to local measures taken to extend the deadline to file certain tax returns. So adjusting for such activity and then the non-recurring M&A activity in fiscal year 2020, fiscal year 2021 as adjusted, the general revenue fund forecasted is expected to decline by 6.7% in fiscal year 2021. As we flip the page to the next slide, you will see that such forecast is essentially in line with Puerto Rico's stateside peers. On this slide, based on the data provided by the Center of Budget and Policy Priorities, the fiscal year 2021 general fund revenue forecast decline is actually at the optimistic end of the range. So you will see 15 states are forecasting their fiscal year 2021 revenue decline could be double digits, while only 8 states, excluding Puerto Rico, are expecting their revenue decline to be single digits. Puerto Rico is slightly below average at 12%. Slide 16 shows that longer term, the more economically sensitive general fund revenue streams such as SUT, corporate income tax, and personal income tax grow at Puerto Rico nominal GMP. So consistent with the nominal GMP first previously discussed, the revenue curve is shifted downward due to the loss of economic activity arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. On slide 17, as part of the 2020 fiscal plan strategy to embed Puerto Rico and prioritize its people, Governor Vasquez developed six initiatives to improve the standard of living of Puerto Rico by accelerating the reconstruction process and protecting some of the most critical career public servants. First, the Uniform Remuneration Plan for Career Government Employees, which excludes at-will or confidential employees. Here, the ultimate goal of this plan is essentially to right-size government by optimizing the administration of government and career employees and improving the quality of life of such employees. To achieve such goal, this initiative has been divided in two parts. First, we have the classification plan that essentially was aimed to standardize the roles and the compensation structures across all agencies, and then the compensation plan, which aimed to uniform the compensation to government and career employees. By doing that, we're going to be able to implement effectively and efficiently the single employer solution. Second, Puerto Rico Police Department retirement. The average pension benefits are currently 41% of the base salary for police officers hired under Law 447 and 26% for those hired under Law 1. These initiatives increase the average pension benefit to 50% of base salary for all police officers. Such increase in their pension benefit not only is a social justice measure for these public employees who risk their life for the benefit of the people of Puerto Rico, but it will also provide the right incentive for these public officials. Third, we also included a four-pronged solution for the repeal of the Act 29. We all know the Act 29 was intended to be a permanent solution for a problem. However, in light of the repeal and in light of the confluence of both of the COVID-19 pandemic and such event, we believe that municipalities are left vulnerable and potentially unable to provide essential services to their residents. That's why in the 2020 fiscal plan, we included a proposal, not a permanent one, but a temporary solution, made by government to the oversight board that include four mechanisms to stabilize the municipalities. First, we suggested to provide the municipalities with a 1.3% of the property tax or some equivalent to that through fiscal year 2025. Second, to provide for a reduction in the municipality assessed contribution and an amount equal to the Medicaid federal matching percentage, or FMAP. To the extent in any future year the FMAP is below 50%, a 55% FMAP will be used to calculate the municipality portion of the assessed contribution. Also, in fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021, the government shall fund any shortfall in both the municipal paygo and assessed obligations. And last but not least, we also suggested that no incremental reduction in the municipal appropriation be effective in fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 2022. Fourth, the Disaster Relief Working Capital Fund. In this 2020 fiscal plan, the government is setting aside a $1 billion working capital fund to address the liquidity constraint associated with the reimbursement nature of disaster relief programs. The working capital fund will be set up in fiscal year 2021, and the intention is to accelerate the rebuilding process, particularly permanent projects. There will be a one-time budgetary impact with substantially all funds returned to the general fund, which will allow Puerto Rico to be in a better position upon completion of the program. And the importance of this working capital relief fund is in essence what didn't have when the hurricanes hit, as opposed to Florida or Texas, when the hurricanes hit, they have a rainy day fund, as opposed to Louisiana when Katrina hit. Even though they were in a financial fragile situation, they had access to the capital market, so they were able to issue bonds, repair, and wait for the reimbursement. Unfortunately, when we came to public office and Maria hit, we didn't have those options available. So unless we are able to put aside a revolving fund to fund the reconstruction process, based on the experience we have had so far, we are not going to be able to jumpstart the recovery. Fifth, parametric insurance. The inclusion of the parametric insurance initiative in the 2020 fiscal plan is the government's proactive response to comply with the obtain and maintain insurance requirement as levied by the Stafford Act and FEMA's recovery policies. In light of the upcoming hurricane season and in the midst of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, which has significantly hindered the government's ability to effectively respond to a natural disaster, this initiative is of paramount importance. The government simply cannot afford not to obtain support from FEMA for subsequent natural catastrophe, simply because of non-compliance with the O&M requirement. The benefits of such insurance are threefold. It will provide liquidity, it will provide compliance with the FEMA recovery policy, and will also allow for gradual reduction in insurance costs. Six, Government Centralized Procurement Act of 2019, specifically Act 73, 2019. As you all know, the government has been transforming the GSA or General Services Administration into a centralized procurement office to increase the efficiency of its procurement activities. This change is being implemented in accordance with the Government's Centralized Procurement Act, and beginning fiscal year 2021, a local GSA or ASE will be funded through general fund and will no longer charge fees for the vast majority of the services that it offers other government agencies. The purpose of this act is to provide additional oversight and transparency in the government procurement processes. That's why we believe $5 million is a small cost to ensure the procurement of $1 billion of government purchased services goods is done in such a way that provides visibility, transparency, and accountability. Such $5 million investment will pay by itself, as the new procurement process will generate efficiencies once it is implemented. Additional oversight of the government procurement process longer makes sense to ensure the right checks and balances are in place. In the next slide, number 18, we talk about the fiscal measures and how the economic reality has requires that we take a revised approach with respect to them. First, we believe that on the fiscal front, a delay is required in implementing any incremental reduction for all agencies until fiscal year 2023 in order to allow Puerto Rico adequate time to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. And also, the 2020 fiscal plan assumes no incremental expense cuts for the Department of Education, Department of Health, and Department of Public Safety for the duration of the forecast, given the critical nature of the services these agencies provide. On the agency efficiencies topic, the 2020 fiscal plan presents a new way forward, very similar to what the Oversight Board is proposing. Our way forward focuses on delivering efficient, high-quality, sustainable government services for the people of Puerto Rico. The model rests on 4 pillars: growth, efficiency, customer experience, and sustainability, all meant to promote a healthy and thriving Puerto Rico. On the healthcare side, we are convinced that the measures implemented by the government have reduced the rate of healthcare cost inflation through the launch of the new managed care model, pharmacy reimbursement reform, the lowering prescription drug costs by effectively managing the prescription drug list, and sharing coordination of benefits data with managed care organizations. The government will not implement any additional cost-cutting healthcare measures at the expense of basic coverage for the most vulnerable segment of our people. However, we'll be in the position to entertain any efficiencies that could derive benefits for the people as well. On the tax reform side, Puerto Rico has reduced income tax rate as well as other taxes such as B2B sales and use tax, as well as prepared food sales and use tax, while broadening the tax base on technology and other innovative practices. This has been done on a revenue neutral basis. On the tax compliance and fees enhancement, the initiatives involve employing technology and other practices to capture revenue from under-leveraged sources. Such initiatives will increase run rate revenues by $474 million by fiscal year 2025. On the appropriations, the central government will not reduce appropriations granted to municipalities and the University of Puerto Rico for the next 2 years, in line with other fiscal measures as proposed in the 2020 fiscal plan. On the Social Security side, as you know, Act 71, 2019 established a mechanism to enroll police officers in Social Security, optional for officers with less than 10 years until mandatory retirement. Said enrollment was effective on January 1st, 2020. Now, the government will enact future legislation to enroll teachers and judges in Social Security, subject to certain terms and conditions. On the next slide, on the structural reforms topic, you will remember that the prior fiscal plan submitted by government focuses on fiscal and economic reform to address the aftermath of discrete single event crises such as hurricanes or earthquakes. However, We believe that the COVID-19 crisis poses a new challenge that is ongoing and is much more profound. Even though the government has kept the same timing for implementation of many of the structural reforms as of the February 28, 2020 submission, at this time it is simply uncertain that the timing of the implementation of these reforms can be maintained because of the economic uncertainty surrounding us. In conclusion, there is no doubt that the COVID-19 has changed and will continue to alter our lives profoundly. The lingering issue is how both the global and the national economies will come back from the shutdowns. In the absence of herd immunity or a vaccine for COVID-19, neither of which seems likely in the near term, countries like Puerto Rico will require an effective testing and tracing regime so that people can have confidence that when they go to restaurants or other businesses, they don't go sick. Reason why a significant portion of the CRF funding was set aside for testing, contact tracing, and many other initiatives. Despite these many challenges, the state of the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico is optimistic, determined, and full of potential. In the nearly 4 years since Congress passed Promesa, Puerto Rico has been challenged by the most damaging hurricanes in U.S. history and the strongest earthquakes in the Caribbean in more than a century. And now the island faces unprecedented uncertainty along with the rest of the world related to the global COVID-19 pandemic. This natural disaster and the COVID-19 health crisis have further complicated an already decades-long island-wide recession marked by significant population loss. As the government guides the island through its litigious flight of three cases, we will remain committed and will continue to pursue outcomes that are fair and just to all constituents. The government goals is to reimagine, revitalize, and rebuild Puerto Rico in a stronger fashion so that it can develop its full capacity for the benefit of not only the island residents, but for the United States as a whole, because we are also part of the nation. As noted earlier, the government strongly believes that the board will have to reconsider its February 2020 proposed plan of adjustment for the Commonwealth, which has been premised on the pre-COVID-19 economic assumptions, based in the May 9, 2019 certified fiscal plan. When the board filed the proposed plan of adjustment, the government not necessarily embraced it because the proposed pension reduction measures impose a disproportionate burden on retirees, and in our opinion, did not fairly address the improved treatment of bondholders' claim against the prior proposed plan and did not account for the costs that government pensioners have already suffered prior to the commencement of the Title III cases, in contrast to other pension treatment in other municipal bankruptcies. Now, because of the substantial negative effects of the COVID-19, we'll have the economic assumptions used in the May 9, 2019 certified fiscal plan, particularly with respect to the debt sustainability and the economic impact of certain cost-cutting measures. We believe that the proposed plan of adjustment is not likely, it's not feasible in this COVID-19 reality. As such, the proposed plan of adjustment, we believe, should be reevaluated and potentially revised or substantially revised. But make no mistake, the government of Puerto Rico is totally committed. It will remain committed to achieve fiscal responsibility, to find a solution to our debt restructuring process, and will continue to work to get access to the capital markets. And that desire and that commitment has never been stronger. We will continue to work with the board to negotiate with the bondholders through any process, including mediation process, or in any other effective way on a fair and feasible plan of adjustment that protects the people of Puerto Rico and continues Puerto Rico's path to economic recovery and fiscal sustainability. The solution has to be a win-win for everybody. And we are this together. And I have said it many times before, either we swim together or we sink together. And obviously, as we stated, the debt repayment solution cannot rest solely on austerity. Finally, I want to thank the Oversight Board for its continued fair and transparent dealings. On behalf of Governor Vasquez, I assure my fellow Long Island citizens that we have labored tirelessly to present a fiscal plan that has been well thought and well prepared, that is fair, that balances the interests of all stakeholders, that protects our most vulnerable residents, and provides the foundation for rebuilding Puerto Rico to the thriving society that we all deserve. Mr. Chairman, the members of the Oversight Board, Executive Director, on behalf of the government of Puerto Rico, I hereby submit the Puerto Rico's 2020 fiscal plan for certification in accordance with the requirements established by PROMESA and the duly elected government's policy decisions and goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marrero. Thank you very much for your very complete presentation. I'd like to apologize. We've had some technical difficulty with regards to the slides, but however, they have been uploaded. They have been uploaded to the website for the benefit of the public. Once again, our apologies, but the information is available to the public. Now, I would like to move on to point 7 of today's agenda, and that would be the discussion of the proposed revisions to the certified Commonwealth Fiscal Plan. And I would like to once again recognize Mr. Esco, our Executive Director, to give a presentation on the board's review of the government's proposed revisions to the fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Mr. Esco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank Mr. Omar Morado, the government representative, for the presentation of the submitted fiscal plan. One of the most important mandates of PROMESA is the elaboration of the fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and its instrumentalities, to lay out a path for fiscal balance, a return to capital markets, and economic sustainability for the island's future. More than ever, the government must seize this opportunity, this moment, to fundamentally reform an economy that has been in a long-term recession, to make the structural and operational reforms needed, and re-engineer government services to make them more effective and cost-efficient for the people of Puerto Rico. That said, the Oversight Board believes that the government's proposed plan as submitted is not in compliance with the requirements of PROMESA. Several core misalignments included in the government's fiscal plan make their plan not certifiable. First, on agency efficiencies, the government's fiscal plan includes softening of efficiency measures and the elimination of specific operational reforms to be undertaken for key agencies, including the Department of Public Safety, Department of Corrections, and others. Government agencies must pursue a clear established set of milestones to achieve their budget targets without sacrificing quality on important services provided to the people of Puerto Rico. Second, on structural reforms, the government maintains the previous structural reform projections of growth despite the delays in and the limited implementation. And it reiterates a 4-year transition for the welfare to work requirement. Third, on healthcare, the government's fiscal plan assumes Medicaid funding will continue beyond fiscal year 2022 with unlegislated sources of federal funds that cover 55% of all expenditures. Also, the government's fiscal plan does not reflect measures that will bend the curve of healthcare costs and the financial impact associated with these measures. While the government has moved to a single region managed care model, there has been a lack of progress on fraud, waste, and abuse initiatives, including enrollment verification, including a fully operational MFCU and program integrity analytics, and value-based reforms. For example, the mandatory DRG program participation for the MCOs. This puts Puerto Rico at risk of having major healthcare costs that it will not be able to cover in the long term. Fourth, the proposed plan does not include all of the pension reforms, including the monthly pension benefits reduction and the pension freeze on benefits accruals for the teacher retirement system and the judicial retirement system. In addition, for future retirees, as Mr. Morado described in the Puerto Rico Police Bureau, it increases pension benefits to 50% of base salary versus the current 41%, which is reflected in Law 447, or the 26% reflected in Law 1, which would represent an increase of $25 million per year plus inflation. And lastly, the proposed plan provides incremental funding to municipalities in the equivalent of the 1.03% property tax through fiscal year 2025, which is currently collected for potential debt service. Until such time as debt service is determined, these funds cannot be reapportioned. Moreover, the proposed plan assumes that in fiscal year 20 and 21, the Commonwealth would fund any shortfall in both the municipal pay-go and assessed obligations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Esco. The reality is that residents of Puerto Rico are not particularly satisfied with the services they receive from the government. Education, healthcare, police, roads, electricity, water, and I don't think they're mistaken. We all know that the answer is no, they are not satisfied. But the reason that we are where we are is not lack of money. The government has sufficient funding in many cases to provide much better services to our people. Throwing more money at the problem or hiring more people will not fix it. We need to better manage the government. We need a better managed government able to achieve and implement and deliver services to the people of Puerto Rico. For decades, the people of Puerto Rico have been waiting for real transformation. They have been patient and resilient. But Puerto Rico is running out of time, and now is most definitely the moment to act. The problem is that the way the government is set up makes it bureaucratic and inefficient. I'm not referring to this government, I'm referring to the Commonwealth government in general. It has been that way for decades. The government needs to change the way it does things and manage its resources better to give its people, our people, better services. To do that, it needs a real and achievable plan. That's what Puerto Rico's fiscal plan is all about, a map, a guide to put the government on the right path to help it do things better and more efficiently, less costly, so that it can deliver better services to the people. Given the extraordinary circumstances we are living today, this plan is a wake-up call for this government and the government to come. Puerto Ricans want to work to be productive and secure a better future for their families and for our island as a whole. To that majority, what is important is not party politics. It's not red or blue. What the vast majority want is better government services. They want better K-12 education, better higher education. They want opportunities on our island, that their children can find a job after they finish school. They want a better job opportunities for all, a chance to earn a living here, so that they won't have to move to the mainland, as hundreds of thousands have had to do. They want better health care. They want to feel safe and to drive around and go on good roads with their families. They also want lower electricity and water bills. In short, they want what we all want. The people of Puerto Rico need and deserve plenty of good jobs, a good economy, and better, more efficient government services. But we haven't had any of these things for successive years through multiple governments. Instead, since 2005, the number of people living in poverty has increased. The economy has gotten worse. Electricity has remained expensive and unreliable, and government services remain poor and costly. On top of these long-standing economic challenges, in the last 3 years, Puerto Rico has suffered large-scale natural disasters, including hurricanes Irma, Maria, the earthquakes in the South, 2020, and now the COVID-19 epidemic. As a result, our people are leaving the island. They're leaving for jobs, they're leaving for education, they're leaving to provide their families with greater opportunities. And of course, this makes matters worse from an economic standpoint. We need to turn things around. And we've been at this for quite some time. Unfortunately, the tools and promesas mandates are limited to fiscal planning and budgets, but not implementation. Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to express myself also on the fiscal plan.
Mr. Gonzalez, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me? I'm not on mute. Let's go again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, fiscal plans have been able to drive major improvements. Progress within the government has been slow overall. Government agencies have reduced expenditures, but typically not in the fashion that the Oversight Board included in its fiscal plans. Instead of rethinking business processes and ways of working, agencies have almost exclusively relied on attrition and early retirement programs, broadly applied to reduce expenses in ways that may cause longer-term risks to its ability to deliver services. Progress has also been limited across other key reforms. Some examples include actions to consolidate government agencies and to allocate resources away from back office to frontline activities have been severely slowed or abandoned altogether. There continue to be issues with financial transparency and accountability, given delays in system integration. For example, accounting systems that are still disconnected, and in establishing a robust Office of the Chief Financial Officer function to ensure a coordinated government fiscal management effort across budgeting, implementation, personnel, and procurement. Efforts to improve ease of doing business in Puerto Rico have not resulted in meaningful change, and Puerto Rico's rankings on a worldwide basis continue to decline as other jurisdictions have improved. At this critical time, when we want to attract manufacturing back to the island, this is ever more important. Labor force participation has not increased given the government's refusal to pursue comprehensive private labor market reform, coupled with a major delay in institution of the welfare to work requirements and limited public communication efforts to raise awareness of the new earned income tax benefit. While the government has completed the transition to a single region managed care model for Medicaid, it has stalled in pursuing value-based reforms and Medicaid fraud, waste, and abuse reform initiatives. Investments that the fiscal plans have funded for addition of staff or improvements in compensation, for example, police, civilian, administrative staff, forensics technicians and specialists, police disability and social security participation, have not been spent as intended and are often delayed, diluting their intended effect. In order to overcome the challenges facing the island and to put Puerto Rico on a sustainable trajectory, it is critically important for the government to commit to real reform and to follow through on execution of those reforms. We have a critical problem with respect to follow through and execution on matters that we've been addressing as requiring reforms for almost 4 years now. It is time to follow through and execute. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since 2016, the Oversight Board has worked to fulfill its mandate under PROMESA. Due to the disasters, the board's efforts have focused on utilizing certified fiscal plans and budgets to ensure Puerto Rico is able to respond to these crises, continue to provide services to the people, and fix the island's fiscal and economic problems once and for all, as stated before, and into the future. The board's fiscal plans have urged the kind of changes the government has to make to improve the island's economy and return to prosperity by reducing unemployment through human capital, welfare, and education reforms, expanding business activities and job creation through better tax, property registry, and permit systems, and improving the electric power system. They have all focused on improving the government services for the people of Puerto Rico. Fiscal plans have also provided more resources to support government workers on the front lines, salary raises for teachers, principals, firefighters, and police officers are well earned and deserved, investments in hospitals, correctional institutions, ports, public safety equipment, and other infrastructure, and forms for pro-jobs programs such as the Earned Income Tax Credit, a need-based scholarship for the UPR students, clean water, and an emergency reserve to enable immediate action in times of crisis, among others. Despite these emergencies, in the last nearly 4 years, the Oversight Board has made progress in creating a more affordable government. This has enabled the government of Puerto Rico to increase expenditures at a time of crisis, which have been several, while retaining a balanced budget. For example, thanks to the fiscal plans, Puerto Rico has been better financially prepared than almost any state in the nation to deal with the present COVID-19 crisis. In short, government expenditures have been reduced by $1 billion on an ongoing basis. Revenue compliance has increased by over $200 million, and transparency and control over government spending have been enhanced. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Dr. Biggs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Progress has been made in balancing the budget, but unfortunately, the government has failed to implement most of the structural reforms and operational changes needed to increase long-term economic growth and improve the quality of government services to the people of Puerto Rico. Labor and welfare reform have stalled, so it is likely that Puerto Rico will continue to have the most regulated and least well-performing labor market in the United States. Efforts at ease of doing business reform have not changed the burden on business in any meaningful way, meaning that Puerto Rico will continue to lag the rest of the U.S. as an attractive place to do business. Rather than achieving budget savings by improving the way services are delivered, the government has reduced the number of employees via early retirement programs. This approach often worsens the quality of services government provides to the people. In many areas, the government has been unable to implement the changes needed or to use the additional resources provided in the way they were intended. In short, successive governments of Puerto Rico over different administrations have failed to meet the increasingly urgent need for real change. Without real change, Puerto Rico's future is likely to be very much like its present, with too many Puerto Ricans living in poverty, too few able to find good jobs, too much pressure to emigrate to find a better life, and too little faith in government institutions. As Puerto Rico and the country try to recover from the current economic and health crises, the local government must act now to make the necessary changes while federal funds are available to help us along.
David,
Jose,
thank you,
can you
Dr. Biggs, for your comments. Now I'd like to call on Professor Skeel for his. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our vision for what Puerto Rico can and should be emerges from what is possible based on the resources that Puerto Rico has. We see children whose schools are innovative, whose schools embrace project-based teaching and bilingual education. We see high school students eager to take college courses before they even graduate high school to get credits toward their bachelor or associate degree. We see UPR graduates who turn into instant entrepreneurs with blueprints for success in business, no longer held back by endless permitting processes and unnecessary licenses they never need to get the job done. We see men and women who can take advantage for lifelong learning to improve their skills that allow them to change jobs and get ahead in their careers. We see family life with reliable, affordable electricity that can sustain hurricanes, and where the electricity is largely generated by clean and more renewable energy. We see companies from all over the world investing in Puerto Rico because they can hire well-educated Puerto Ricans eager to take the jobs they create and who speak the language of technology and engineering and science. We want Puerto Rican pensions to be absolutely safe, not just for today, but tomorrow and the day after tomorrow and 30 years from now. We see, and we're doing everything we can to help make it possible, a Puerto Rico of opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Skeel, for your comments. Now I would like to ask our Executive Director, Mr. Esco, to provide a general overview of the proposed fiscal plan as proposed by the board, which will be under consideration for certification today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Oversight Board spent the last couple of months analyzing in great detail the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the Puerto Rican economy and how we can draw a map to recovery in times of uncertainty. We've carefully studied the data we have, we've considered what we know, what we don't know, and we're certain that the fiscal plan we are certifying today, with all persisting uncertainty aside, is the best possible plan under the present circumstances. Puerto Rico can overcome this current public health and economic crisis. The 2020 fiscal plan lays out the actions that the government must take to prepare for the future, despite uncertainties and despite difficulties. It includes practical actions to create a better government with resources focused on improving the services to the people. While the Oversight Board is unable to certify the government's proposed fiscal plan as presented, we believe that the fiscal plan that is before you for certification provides the best possible agenda for Puerto Rico to move forward given the circumstances. And now more than ever, reforms, government efficiency measures are essential to improve the economy, create the best possible conditions for the people and businesses of Puerto Rico, and make the government of Puerto Rico more efficient, effective, and responsive to the people. Specifically, the 2020 fiscal plan lays out actions that should be taken to make the structural reforms in the economy, improve labor participation, improve the ease of doing business, improve energy, infrastructure management, and it introduces milestone budgeting, which will allow for investments in certain areas once key requirements are met. Moreover, the 2020 fiscal plan includes strategic one-time investments to speed up Puerto Rico's recovery in light of the natural disasters and COVID-19 by allocating funds to strengthen the island's public healthcare system, its human capital, and its telecommunications infrastructure. The 2020 fiscal plan reflects the fact that the government has not taken sufficient action to transform government services. And as such, and in view of the COVID-19 health crisis, it provides a one-year delay in most categories of measures to allow the government to focus on implementation of these reforms. Looking at the slide, if we have them, the shock of the COVID-19 pandemic on Puerto Rico is severe. Our analysis shows that the Puerto Rico economy will contract by 4% in this current fiscal year of 2020. The economic base case is similar to the impact of Hurricane Maria, with a sharp decline in real GNP and a very mild 0.5% recovery in the coming fiscal year of 2021, driven by COVID-19 related federal funds from the CARES Act, CDBG-DR, and other federal programs. Our projections show further declines in real GNP in fiscal year 2022 and 2023, and close to zero growth in 2024 and 2025. Simply put, the Puerto Rico economy will contract over the period of 5 years. That analysis leads the fiscal plan to project a central government deficit from fiscal year 2032 onward. That's 6 years sooner than the previous certified fiscal plan projected. And this 2020 fiscal plan projects a total budget surplus of about $8 billion between fiscal years 2020 and 2032, compared to almost $23 billion in the previous certified fiscal plan. That's a decline of about 65%. Given the uncertainty of this current environment, the 2020 fiscal plan also presents an alternative downside scenario. Under the illustrative alternative downside scenario, the economy is projected to shrink further by 6.1% this fiscal year and decline another 3.7% in fiscal year 2021. This alternative downside scenario is based on IMF projections for the United States. I need to stress that that downside scenario is only included for informational purposes. It is not what the fiscal plan projections are based upon, but it provides a view as to a worst case scenario. With regard to federal funding, which is so critical to Puerto Rico at this time, the estimates of federal funding included in the fiscal plan, with regard to hurricane-related funds, $83 billion of disaster relief funding in total, unchanged from the previous fiscal plan, from federal and private sources, will be dispersed in the hurricane reconstruction effort, we assume over a period of 15 years. It's used for a mixture of funding for individuals, funding for the public, and funding to cover part of the Commonwealth's share of the cost of disaster relief funding. $48 billion of this amount is estimated to come from FEMA, Disaster Relief Fund for public assistance, hazard mitigation, mission assignments, individual assistance. $8 billion is to come from private and business insurance payouts. $7 billion is related to other sources of federal funding. And about $20 billion is to come from the Housing and Urban Development CDBG-DR program. With regard to earthquake-related federal funding, the plan projects $595 million in funding from FEMA to cover the damage caused by the earthquakes. With regard to COVID-19 related federal funding, the plan includes $14 billion estimated as the portion of federal funds that will be allocated to Puerto Rico as a whole, relying on a combination of direct federal contribution to the government and to agencies, as well as based on a historical analogy from 2009 during the American Recovery and Reconstruction Act. When looking at implementation of the fiscal plan, there are few, if any, reductions in most agencies for the fiscal year 21 budget to enable a full effort and focus on implementation and recovery. That said, given the projected continued contraction of the economy, efforts to reduce agency budgets, implement those agency efficiencies, restart again in fiscal year 22. This pause means there's a delay in any further subsidy cuts to the University of Puerto Rico and municipalities. It means that most agencies maintain their fiscal year 20 level of budget in fiscal year 21. But the measures in the fiscal plan, the measures aimed at efficiency and cost reduction, which have not changed since the 2008 fiscal plan, include agency efficiencies. Again, consolidating agencies to leverage the valuable human and financial resources, centralizing the procurement in departments to achieve greater purchasing power and transparency, transforming processes, deploying new management tools and practices to deliver better government services for substantially lower cost. Second, these measures include creation of an office of the CFO, instituting financial controls, accountability, centralizing fiscal authority, improving governance, accountability, transparency over the budgets, reform implementation, procurement, and personnel policy. Third, Medicaid reform, taking the necessary steps to curb fraud, waste, and abuse in the healthcare system, ensuring that resources are directed to those in need of healthcare services, and improving healthcare outcomes on the island. Fourth, enhanced tax compliance and optimize taxes and fees. We need to continue to use and expand new technology and other innovative commonly used practices in other jurisdictions to broaden the tax base, reduce fraud, and improve fairness while boosting overall tax revenues. And we need to adjust existing taxes and fees to capture revenues from under-leveraged sources. Fifth, reduction of appropriations to encourage sound fiscal self-management and revenue generation amongst municipalities and the University of Puerto Rico. The reduction of central government appropriations will continue after fiscal year 21, while at the same time meeting the needs of students facing any financial challenge with the creation of an independent scholarship fund. And lastly, comprehensive pension reform. We need to improve the financial stability of public employees through a reform that would maintain enough funds to comply with the payment of pensions and provide the administration necessary to ensure a defined contribution plan for all employees. Without the need to achieve incremental budget savings this fiscal year, the government should focus all its efforts in fiscal year 2021 on making the real changes across government to assure better delivery of essential services. These reforms are designed to promote focus of finite government resources on frontline service delivery that matters to residents. Real changes that are required in the fiscal plan include, but are not limited, for example, in the Department of Education, to institute and implement a detailed back-to-school plan, a time and attendance reporting policy for all employees, recording daily student attendance, efficiently managing the student-teacher ratio by observing its own staffing policies and generating savings through improved procurement and more transparent accounting. At the Department of Health, the plan includes focus on core healthcare services by saving money through centralized procurement of supplies across all the agencies and all the public hospitals, developing an action plan for the telehealth needs, consolidating the regional Medicaid offices, improving hospital management, and merging the Administración de Seguros de Salud, or ASES, into the department. In the Department of Public Safety, the plan moves more officers from administrative positions in the back office to the communities where they can better serve residents and puts civilian staff in the back office. It requires reducing overtime with better time management and fully consolidating the back office of the Department of Public Safety. In the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, it requires an analysis of the utilization of facilities given the decline in prison population and the generation of savings through improved procurement. And finally, as an example, in the Department of Economic Development, we need to finalize the consolidation of the Puerto Rico Tourism Company into the department and complete the ascription of the planning board per Puerto Rican law. We need to renegotiate procurement contracts and publish quarterly reports of the economic incentives being delivered. To drive efficient and successful implementation of the key reforms and outcomes, the fiscal plan introduces milestone budgeting, which will allow for investments in certain areas once key milestones are met. Some of the crucial milestones and budget items include providing bonuses for select Hacienda employees to complete the issuance of the 2017 audit and prepare a draft of the 2018 audit. A bonus for select Department of Education staff to implement proper time and attendance reporting. It includes budgetary authority in certain areas of the government once the defined contribution accounts are fully implemented and funds are transferred to the individual accounts. And it provides funding based on success milestone budgets for to enable the ERP implementation. There are investments in the COVID response and investments in this fiscal plan for core priority areas. The fiscal measures that I highlighted are important to transform the fiscal and economic trajectory of the island. But in times of constrained resources and in the face of these major crises, we also need to make sure that we allocate funds to the highest priority needs. So this fiscal plan includes substantial investments in the government's response to the COVID-19 public health and economic crisis, as well as critical investment in the island human capital and telecommunications infrastructure to spur recovery and growth. It also continues several of the investments that were outlined in the previous fiscal plan. To further these immediate priorities, these substantial investments in the fiscal plan, totaling about $6 billion from fiscal year 20 through 25, are investments in the people of Puerto Rico. They are investments in healthcare, which includes capital expenditures for the public hospitals, more hiring of public school nurses, establishing a scholarship fund, a new scholarship fund, to encourage graduating doctors from the medical school at UPR to serve in the non-metro areas of the island. It includes funds for opioid treatment and hepatitis treatment, and towards increased reimbursement rates for services provided by primary care and outpatient specialty providers, as well as hospitals. In the area of investments in public education, it includes investments to improve English language teaching, to incentivize schools to achieve better educational outcomes by publishing scorecards for all the schools. It creates scorecards for student teacher attendance, graduation rates, all of this to inform the public better. And it includes the funds necessary to pay outstanding amounts of previous salary increases to transitorio or transitory teachers. In the area of public safety, the investments include the third year in a row of the third and last year, I should say, of back pay for the police. $122 million again this year to complete the $366 million of back pay owed. This is also the second half. This year will include the second half of the 30% increase in salaries for the police. Funding for recruitment and training of cadets is included. Funding for hiring of incremental staff for the emergency management services and forensics, as well as equipment for firefighters. There are new investments to improve access to broadband in rural areas and to provide business and technology training to provide greater opportunity to the people of Puerto Rico to enter the workforce of the future. The investments include conducting an oversight board commission study for the private sector and the government to define a comprehensive and actionable plan to reactivate the manufacturing sector in Puerto Rico. And finally, there is the investment that enables us to expedite the reconstruction efforts by providing $750 million in working capital to be made available to facilitate FEMA-approved reconstruction efforts. All of this is critical, but structural reforms are even more important. Since 2017, the Oversight Board has worked with the government to implement numerous structural reforms, but there has been little meaningful progress in most areas. The structural reforms remaining in this 2020 fiscal plan are those where there is government alignment on the need to pursue change. That said, with each year, as a result of disasters and poor implementation, the reforms have been delayed. And as such, the 2020 fiscal plan provides an updated forecast for reflecting the delays, but also outlining the potential positive impact looking forward. The 2020 fiscal plan outlines the following structural reforms. First, human capital and welfare reform, focusing on promoting participation in the formal labor force by creating incentives to work through the Earned Income Tax Credit, benefits, and the Nutritional Assistance Program, or NAP reform, as well as providing comprehensive workforce development opportunities. These reforms are projected to increase economic growth by 0.15% by fiscal year 2026. The second area of reform, K-12 education. transforming the K through 12 education system to dramatically improve student outcomes and contribute to an effective workforce in the long term. These reforms are projected to add an additional 0.13% from fiscal years 2037 to 2049. The third area, ease of doing business, improving the competitiveness and attractiveness of Puerto Rico's economy in order to attract a greater amount of investment and more job creation. Promoting economic activity and reducing obstacles to starting and sustaining a business in Puerto Rico through comprehensive reform includes obtaining permits easier, registering property, improving the ease of paying taxes, registering property, obtaining permits, Establishing best-in-class entities to attract investment and increase tourism is also included. And these reforms are projected to drive a 0.3% uptick in overall growth by fiscal year 2025. Power sector reform, providing lower cost, more reliable energy through the transformation of PREPA, the establishment of an independent, expert, and well-funded energy regulator, and the development of cleaner, lower cost power generation is projected to increase growth by 0.3% by fiscal year 2024. And finally, infrastructure reform, prioritizing economically transformative capital investments with federal funds and our own funds made available because of the disasters or made available on a regular basis from annual obligations. In conclusion, the effect of multiple unprecedented national disasters on top of 15 years of a poor economy has left Puerto Rico with substantially diminished resources and capacity. Even with implementation of the far-reaching growth-inducing structural reforms I've outlined, this 2020 fiscal plan still projects that the government will be unable to afford to pay the public debt as originally contracted. Even with implementation of far-reaching growth-inducing structural reforms, the 2020 fiscal plan projects that the government is unable to afford to meet its current contractual obligations. Recognizing the importance of the ongoing Title III proceedings, but taking into account these realities, the Oversight Board has paused discussion and prosecution of the Plan of Adjustment and the corresponding disclosure statement filed on February 28, 2020. The Oversight Board recognizes that the development of the February Plan of Adjustment proposed a sustainable debt burden for the Commonwealth at that time, while garnering the support of general obligation and Public Building Administration bondholders holding in excess of 59% of such indebtedness, or approximately $10 billion. This was an important milestone, and it was achieved through the assistance of the court's mediation team, promoting dialogue among the Oversight Board, government, and the PSA creditors, all acting in good faith to achieve a consensual resolution of the Commonwealth's legacy debts. Clearly, the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic has raised the specter of both near-term and long-term material adverse impacts from the virus upon the people of Puerto Rico and its economy. And while the severity and the duration, possibly the recurrence of this pandemic are unknown, as well as the extent of federal support in that light, the Oversight Board's current pause on the implementation of the filed Plan of Adjustment has been and remains appropriate and necessary. The 2020 fiscal plan financial forecasts suggest that the current financial trajectory is not sustainable in the long term. Perhaps more importantly, the 2020 fiscal plan, even if implemented in full on time, will not raise Puerto Rico and its citizens to a level of prosperity comparable to even the poorest states on the U.S. mainland. More needs to be done. There continues to be insufficient political appetite to drive the types of structural reforms that are needed to create sustainable economic growth, and an inability to implement even the reforms that have been nominally agreed upon. Incremental reforms that could be implemented by the government above and beyond those in the plan include improving the private labor market to make it more flexible by repealing restrictive laws and creating labor conditions more like those on the mainland, and meaningful tax reform to broaden the base of collection and lower rates. However, the 2020 fiscal plan is a minimal baseline, and it lays out an agenda with prudent and integrated actions to restore fiscal balance in the short term. The 2020 fiscal plan also outlines opportunities for more ambitious additional reforms that would enable the conditions for a long-term fiscal balance. The time to make these changes is now, so that Puerto Rico may fully recover from all of its recent crises and have the opportunity to return to prosperity. This fiscal plan lays out the meaningful changes needed to improve the economy and the government services to the people of Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Esco. Now I'd like to move to the Section 8, we've received several comments and questions whilst throughout the presentation. We'll go over them now, and I'll ask Mr. Esco to read them and to address those issues. Mr. Esco?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first question we received from Elba Del Valle. Her question: it seems that the government is the biggest employer on the island. What steps are being taken to bring or create more jobs in the private sector? Unemployment is a major problem. Also, the western part of the island has not seen much growth. Are there any plans to develop that area in the future? What is being done to recuperate the money that was, quote, mismanaged, unquote, by the ex-Secretary of Education and her group? That is many questions. Let me try to just quickly respond to all of them. The key part of this fiscal plan that will enable us to create new jobs are the structural reforms. The structural reforms, whether it's improving education, improving the ease of doing business, or improving workforce development, will increase labor participation, will attract new investments, will attract quality jobs, and will make the people of Puerto Rico ready for those quality jobs. So the one single area to focus on for changing and improving jobs is the structural reforms in the fiscal plan. In terms of the western part of the island, the government has put forward plans to begin the debris and demolition in some of the areas. They intend to bring further requests for that funding forward, and the funds are available for that in the current budget. And then we have agreed with the government that the next step would be to develop a redevelopment plan, and a vision for the Southwest as a whole, that would then make use of federal funds and other funds to redevelop and rebuild that portion of the island. We won't make any comment on the federal case with regard to the ex-Secretary of Education at this time, but I urge those who are interested to look at the very in-depth analysis of the management of funds in the Department of Education, current Department of Education, in the fiscal plan. It lays out a level of detail on administrative versus front office teaching. It lays out the spending on special education. It lays out how capital expenditures or facilities are maintained. There is a great wealth of information in this new fiscal plan that will help you to understand how funds are being spent currently in the Department of Education. The second question received from John Mudd. Question from Mr. Mudd. Given the new fiscal plan, will there be a new plan of adjustment filed soon? We won't be answering any questions about the plan of adjustment. We've said what we can say at this point. Our focus has been on getting to a fiscal plan, and now our focus needs to be on budgeting to get the Commonwealth in place for a end of the fiscal year, June 30th. We will, of course, on the basis of this new fiscal plan, work with the government, with the mediators, and with the creditors to determine next steps. Question number 3. Samuel Tumpkin asks, why does the Oversight Board's proposed fiscal plan project a significantly worse population decline than in the Commonwealth's draft? How does this comport with the Census Bureau's official estimate that Puerto Rico's population increased by 340 people between July 1st, 2017 and July 1st, 2018? Thank you, Mr. Tumpkin. Our fiscal plan uses a population methodology that is different from that of the census. The Census Bureau has shown itself to over-report the population in Puerto Rico consistently. We understand that the population model we're using is more accurate than the census estimate because it more adequately represents the reality in Puerto Rico. It's based on, instead of the Census Bureau, it's based on tracking monthly data on births, deaths, and net migration off the island. Question number 4 from Manuel Quinea. The question, will this fiscal plan be used to substantially reduce the recoveries for general obligation bondholders that is proposed in the plan of adjustment? Mr. Quinea, as I described earlier, we won't be commenting on the future of the plan of adjustment at this time, except to say that we are all aligned on the need to exit bankruptcy as soon as reasonably possible in a way that is affordable given the new situation post-COVID in Puerto Rico. Question number 5 from Kate Long. Why is the absenteeism rate amongst Puerto Rico's central government workers infinitely higher than the absenteeism rate for mainland state and local employees? Thank you, Ms. Long. First of all, I think that this question arrives from poor reporting and poor data. The the absenteeism that's being reported by the government in their personnel reports is very poorly collected, and it doesn't necessarily outline what the absenteeism. So one of the key elements of this fiscal plan is focusing agencies on doing real time and attendance reporting. There are time and attendance systems in places like the Department of Education, in places like the police, that have not yet been utilized, although licenses have been paid for and the systems exist. So this year, the focus on implementation is to get folks to actually use those time and attendance systems. Once we have better data, we can talk about whether or not absenteeism is higher or lower or the same. But I believe that the data that's currently being reported by the government is unfortunately not terribly accurate. Question number 6 from Eli Sepulveda. Question is, will the recoveries for general obligation bondholders be lowered in a future amended plan of adjustment, or will they remain the same? Again, Mr. Sepulveda, I'm sorry, but we're not prepared to answer questions about a future plan of adjustment at this time beyond what we've said. Question number 7 from Concepcion Gonzalez. The question is the board considering the rise of food and goods costs and prices after the COVID-19 hit Puerto Rico and the world in determining the aid to business and citizens? Is the board monitoring the impact of the Puerto Rico Senate and House economic economic impacts in emitting laws that impact the fiscal budget of agencies such as the Justice Department, the Corrections Department, like Bill Senate number 1590, to make retroactive the juror's verdict in all criminal cases in Puerto Rico? Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez, the fiscal plan does include forecasts of inflation. So to the extent that there is inflation in goods and services, that is taken into account in the fiscal plan. The second part of your question, we actively monitor the legislation that is being proposed, and the government there is a process in PROMESA for the government to submit legislation reviewed for fiscal plan compliance. They provide certificates of compliance for each and every piece of legislation when it is compliant in accordance with PROMESA. Question number 8 from John Marigan. Is the Oversight Board coordinating municipal fiscal plans and economic development plans with the U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Development State Office? Is the Fiscal Board working with the USDA to help municipalities create capacity in their loan applications process? Is the Oversight Board communicating with USDA RD to discuss Act 29 of 2019? Has a FOF communicated with them? I'll answer, and then I'll let Mr. Marrero answer on behalf of a FOF. We, in our offices, held a conference call with the department last month. We are working to try and coordinate with the U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Development Office here on the island, and we have been briefing them on these issues. We have discussed the implications of Act 29 for the municipalities with them, and we will continue to work with the municipalities to the extent possible and the USDA to expand the support for municipalities. Mr. Marrero, do you want to add anything? No. Okay, so question number 9 from D. Holzer. The question is, has the FOMB worked with FEMA on coordinating the recovery? The answer is generally yes. We are in close and regular contact with FEMA on all these issues. The fiscal plan that we're presenting today reflects the most up-to-date information provided by FEMA in terms of expectations, and we work with them as closely as possible to understand next steps here on the island. Question number 10 from Kenneth McClintock. Will the Oversight Board promote the use of the USDA B&I loan guarantee under the CARES Act, similar to the Small Business Administration PPP, or Payment Protection Plan, press release? So the answer, Mr. McClintock, is definitely we will continue to work with every federal agency and the government of Puerto Rico to maximize the utilization, the knowledge of what is available to support the economy at every time. We will continue to do that directly with federal government agencies and the government of Puerto Rico, as well as by putting things on our website so that everyone has access to applications, knowledge, and the maximum possible benefit for the people of Puerto Rico. Question number 11. Wait just a second here. Question number 11 from Juan Martinez. With regards to the debt sustainability section of the proposed fiscal plan, A, why does the Oversight Board acknowledge that some of the forecast primary surplus may be unavailable for debt repayment, but does not provide a scenario excluding related revenues when determining implied net tax-supported debt capacity based on the key debt ratios used by Moody's? And B, why are COFINA bonds not considered by the Oversight Board to be tax-supported debt? So, Mr. Martinez, not provide a scenario excluding related revenues. I think the general answer to the first part of your question is that the debt sustainability analysis is an overall projection using various methodologies to forecast different levels of debt sustainability based on different benchmarks. It is not a negotiating position. It is not a specific single number. And all of the data that you just described in terms of what is available versus potentially unavailable needs to be taken into account in the future. B, why are the COFINA bonds not considered? Well, in fact, the COFINA debt is considered net tax-supported debt in the calculations. We received two comments, I should say, from Mr. Erniezer Feliciano. And these comments will be updated to the website along with all of the questions that I've read out and the answers. I believe I'm going to just check. That is all of the public questions we've received. Again, we will update our website to include the questions, the answers, as well as the comments from Mr. Feliciano. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Esco. Now let's move on to section 9 of today's agenda, discussion and certification of the revised Commonwealth Fiscal Plan. And I would like to open the floor to any board member who wishes to comment on the proposed revised fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Mr. Professor Skeel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is our fourth round of fiscal plans. In my view, we've made real progress in some areas in the past 3.5 years. And Puerto Rico, as we've already noted today, was better prepared for the coronavirus crisis with a bigger rainy day fund than almost any state. But there are many areas where progress has not been made, as this fiscal plan that we're considering right now makes clear. Puerto Rico still has not recovered from an economic crisis that is now well into its second decade, and the future remains highly uncertain. My particular expertise is bankruptcy, so I've been especially focused on the effort to restructure Puerto Rico's debt during my time on the board. Among other things, I've been on the special committees that commissioned the Cobre and Kim report, a year-long study which was essentially a debt audit, and which investigated and pursued the findings of the report. When we filed a Title III petition on behalf of Puerto Rico just over 3 years ago, in early May 2017, I fully expected Puerto Rico to have confirmed a plan of adjustment and to have exited from Title III by now. Like everyone else, I couldn't have predicted that Puerto Rico would be rocked by Hurricanes Irma and Maria, by the forced resignation of Governor Ricardo Rosselló, by the worst earthquakes in nearly a century, and now by the COVID-19 crisis. Still, I'm deeply disappointed that my time on the board may very well come to an end before the restructuring is completed. But my personal feelings are not important. What is important is that Puerto Rico desperately needs to restructure its debt and move on. Most of the island's creditors have not been paid for nearly 4 years, and at some point, it's only fair that they get paid at least part of what they're owed. Puerto Rico will not truly begin to recover and begin to see the first glimmers of economic prosperity again until it emerges from Title III. Because the Commonwealth will not have a balanced budget until the debt is restructured, and because the Oversight Board will stay in place until there are 4 consecutive balanced budgets, you, the people of Puerto Rico, also will not be able to start dreaming of life without an Oversight Board until Puerto Rico emerges from Title III. Before the COVID-19 crisis forced a worldwide economic shutdown, it appeared that the Planned Support Agreement, or PSA, that we agreed to in February, together with other agreements we reached with some of Puerto Rico's unions and with the Retiree Committee in Title III, could serve as the basis for the restructuring. In my view, as I've said before, the PSA was far from perfect, but the PSA had and has widespread creditor support. I believe that the framework of the PSA is still likely to be the best starting point for a confirmable plan of adjustment, and that we need to turn back to it as soon as the current crisis eases. I haven't completely given up hope that a plan of adjustment will be confirmed while I am still on the board. But even if it isn't, our job, in my view, is to lay as strong a foundation as possible so that the new board will be able to quickly finish the task. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Professor Skeel. Does any other board member have any comments that they would like to share? No? There being no more comments from members of the board, and on the basis of the presentation by the board's executive director on the proposed revised fiscal plan for the Commonwealth, I would like to request from Mr. Esco whether she would kindly propose a resolution for the board to consider and vote upon.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to propose a resolution, and I would like to request that Mr. El Khoury read the same into the record.
Very good, thank you. The resolution reads as follows. Whereas on June 30, 2016, the Federal Puerto Rico Oversight Management and Economic Stability Act, PROMESA, was enacted, and whereas Section 101 of PROMESA created the Financial Oversight and Management Board for Puerto Rico, the board, and whereas Section 201 of PROMESA establishes a multi-step procedure for the development, review, and approval of a fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and whereas on May 9, 2019, pursuant to Section 201(d)(2) of PROMESA, the board certified a fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico as developed by the board and issued a compliance certification to the governor and the legislature in connection therewith, pursuant to Section 201(e)(2) of PROMESA. And whereas subsequent to such certification, the board has determined to make certain additional revisions to the revised fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. And whereas by letter dated December 12, 2019, the board, pursuant to Section 201A of PROMESA, provided notice of the schedule for developing, submitting, approving, and certifying a revised fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, which schedule was subsequently revised to permit more time for the submission of the proposed fiscal plan. And whereas on February 28, 2020, the governor submitted a proposed revised fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico to the board, and whereas after reviewing the proposed plan with the governor's representatives and analyzing and deliberating over it with the board's members, economists, consultants, and attorneys, the board notified the governor on March 13, 2020, that the board had determined the governor's proposed fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico did not satisfy PROMESA's requirements, and the board recommended revisions. And whereas the board's notice to the governor described the violations that the board had identified. And whereas on May 3rd, 2020, the governor submitted to the board a proposed fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, attempting to address the identified violations in the prior proposed plan. And whereas representatives of the governor and the board's experts, consultants, and attorneys engaged in extensive discussions thereafter about the governor's proposed fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and the board's concerns about the plan, resulting in the board developing a revised fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. And whereas on May 27, 2020, the board held an open meeting to discuss the proposed fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and whereas the board provided an opportunity for public comment on the proposed fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and whereas after substantial deliberations, the board has determined to certify the fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico as developed by the board, attached here to as Exhibit 1, for submission to the governor and the legislature, which represents the fiscal plan that the board has determined in its sole discretion pursuant to Section 201D2 of PROMESA satisfies the requirements of PROMESA set forth in Section 201B thereof. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved that the board certifies, pursuant to Section 201E2 of PROMESA, the fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico as developed by the board, attached here to as Exhibit 1, for submission to the governor and the legislature, which represents the fiscal plan that the board has determined in its sole discretion, pursuant to Section 201D2 of PROMESA, satisfies the requirements of PROMESA set forth in Section 201B thereof, and which, pursuant to Section 201E2 of PROMESA, shall be deemed approved by the governor. And it is further resolved that the board shall issue a compliance certification for said fiscal plan to the governor and the legislature pursuant to Section 201E2 of PROMESA. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I wish to move that the resolution be approved.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Biggs and Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Alcuri. Now I'd like to ask for a voice vote, if I could, please. First, those in favor, please say yes.
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 Thank you. Anybody opposed, please say no. All members having voted in favor of the motion, the resolution is approved and has passed unanimously. Thank you. Now, let's move on to topic 10. Mr. Esco, moving to the next section of the agenda, could you please provide an update as to the next steps in the development of the budget for fiscal year 2021?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now that the board has certified the 2020 fiscal plan, the board will be sending revised budget targets in the form of a notice of violation to the government, with the expectation to receive a revised budget submission from the government on June 5th, 2020. The board will then submit to the governor and the legislature a compliant budget for the legislature's analysis by June 10th, 2020. And the expectation then is that this allows the legislature to analyze the budget and submit its proposed budget to the board on June 24th, 2020, after which the board will send its notice of violation if needed. We will work tirelessly to ensure the Commonwealth has a certified budget by or on June 30th, 2020 for the beginning of the fiscal year 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Esco. As you mentioned during the beginning of your remarks with regards to the Oversight Board's actions in light of the current COVID-19 crisis, I would like to ask our counsel, Mr. Alcuri, to provide an update to the board on the status of the request of contracts related to COVID-19 purchases of the government of Puerto Rico. Mr. Alcuri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Oversight Board remains committed to executing its congressionally mandated duties, especially during the current health crisis and its related economic impact. As part of this obligation, we strive to uphold transparency and fiscal responsibility to prevent fraud, waste, misuse, or abuse of public funds on the island, including the recent well-publicized attempts by the government of Puerto Rico to acquire COVID-19 test kits during the ongoing pandemic. Since April 6, 2020, the Oversight Board has sent 6 letters to the government requesting all documents pertaining to the negotiation and procurement process of the contracts and purchase orders executed with the counterparties with whom the government contracted to acquire such test kits, including any written communications and other documentation related to such transactions, electronic or otherwise. In addition, the Oversight Board has requested all agencies to provide documentation related to any contracts and purchase orders executed in relation to the pandemic. These requests were made on the basis of the Oversight Board's contract review policy and Executive Order 2020-24, which, despite being enacted to expedite COVID-19 related purchases by government agencies during the pandemic, also recognizes and requires that the Oversight Board receive copies of these specific contracts. Specifically, the order mandates that every contract executed in relation to the pandemic, regardless of its value, shall be transmitted to the Oversight Board the date it is executed. Despite the Oversight Board's efforts, the information received so far does not provide a complete picture of, one, the contracts and purchase orders that have been executed and when, the parties involved in such agreements, and the process by which the contracts and purchase orders were awarded. Accordingly, on May 15, 2020, the Oversight Board directly contacted the Department of Health, the Puerto Rico Emergency Management Administration, and the Office of Management and Budget for this information. So far, only the Office of Management and Budget has responded to our request. As such, we are currently considering taking judicial action to enforce these document requests. Similarly, we'll be contacting agencies of the Puerto Rico government concerning compliance with Executive Order 2020-24, as many of these contracts that have been received fail to adhere to the requirements of the order. Some of these requirements include, for example, that all contracts executed during the governor's emergency declaration have a maximum duration of 60 days. In addition, the order requires that suppliers certify their compliance with Act 222 of 2011, which requires disclosure of campaign contributions by the contracting parties. Finally, we note that upon cross-checking information with the controller's contract registry website, we have discovered contracts which were not submitted to FOMB as required by Executive Order 2020-24 and the board's contract review policy. Consequently, the Oversight Board shall be issuing a series of letters addressing these instances of non-compliance in an attempt to ensure transparency of the government's contracting practice. In addition, we will be informing the government which aspects of its emergency procurement procedures require immediate and fundamental change. To assist in that regard, the Oversight Board will be announcing changes to its contract review policy, including dedicating personnel and resources for a more in-depth review of the government's contract procurement, negotiation, and publication processes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. El Khoury. Now I would like to ask if any members of the board have any comments regarding Mr. El Khoury's presentation. Thank you. There being no additional comments and we have no other matters to cover, I move that we adjourn this meeting.
I second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let's move to a voice vote. Those in favor of adjourning, please say yes.
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 There be no opposition, and all members having voted in favor of adjournment, the meeting is now adjourned at 12:29 on the 27th. Thank you very much. I invite those who would like to stay for the press conference to follow. Thank you very much.